I didn't sit down to write this because I need sympathy. I'm writing because the way it all unfolded was a masterclass in consequences, and because some of you might be staring at the same storm clouds I missed until they were already pouring. If my story helps you get under a roof sooner, good. If you came for revenge, you'll get a different flavor, not revenge, just gravity. Everything falling the exact way it had to, all at once in public, on a weekday, before lunch was even cold. My name is Nolan. I'm 36, operations lead for a regional beverage distributor outside Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in a town where everybody waves from the driver's seat, and half the fights at the high school football game start with, "You think you're better than me?" I married my college girlfriend Sophie when we were 22. We rented a small brick duplex with a patch of lawn I pretended was a yard, then bought a starter house with aluminum siding and a maple out front that made the sidewalk look expensive in October. 2 years later, we had our daughter, Mia, brown eyes, chipmunk cheeks, jumpy little laugh that could make you forget your name. I worked early. I worked late. The warehouse doesn't care about your bedtime. Trucks land when they land, and cartons don't stack themselves. My schedule was the kind that makes neighbors say, "Man, you're hustling," and wives say, "Are you ever home?" I told myself seasons end. I told her that too. Mortgage, daycare, replacing the water heater, we just need to get ahead. On repeat. I wore responsibility like a varsity jacket. The problem with jackets is they can hide the person inside. Sophie worked as a scheduler at Riverside Orthopedics, the busy clinic off Bethel where doctors walk fast and talk faster, and the waiting room is a rotating cast of knee braces. Her job was a wall of phones always ringing and patients who didn't listen the first time. She used to come home lit up stories about grumpy veterans who learned to laugh, or a surgeon who bought the front office pizza. Later, she mostly came home tired. We drifted the way a lot of couples do, not with a bang, but with 100 turned shoulders. She'd be on the couch, phone in her lap. I'd be in the kitchen checking schedules for the morning, feeling useful and righteous about it. We held hands less. We had sex less. We had conversations where we both talked about the weather of our day and neither of us brought a mat for the other to get inside. If you need a villain in this first act, don't make it her. Don't make it me. Make it the space we both pretended wasn't growing. Enter Ethan Caldwell. He wasn't a doctor biomedical equipment tech. If a bone saw hiccuped or the C-arm threw an error, he showed up with a tool bag and a smile. He had work boots that looked clean even after a 12-hour day, and a way of leaning on a counter that made it feel like a bar, not a workplace. He wasn't better looking than me. He was there. He had time. He noticed things. New sweater? You cut your hair? You're always the one who calms patients down. He started as a compliment machine and graduated to confidant. Break room coffee. Walks out to her car. Jokes that let her say a little more than she should. That is how doors open. By degrees. I didn't see it. Not the signs, not the mood swings, not the way her phone lived face down on the table and slept under her pillow. Or I saw it and told myself we were just in a rough patch that would end when I got the promotion to regional. People like me always say that. When I future thing, then we will present fix. The math never works because the variable is attention, not income. D-Day was a Monday in late April. Finals week for the night classes I was taking to finish the degree I'd paused when Mia was born. I had a spread of flashcards and a half-drunk coffee on the table, and Sophie did the thing where she cleans what's already clean and opens the fridge twice without taking anything out. I asked if she was okay. She said, "I'm fine," with the tone that means, "Press me." I said I couldn't get into it, not now, which is not the same as saying, "not ever," but it lands the same. She kept picking, words turning sharper until I lobbed the dumbest thing you can lob when someone is telling you they're drowning. "Stop acting like a teenager, Soph!" She stopped dead, put both hands flat on the counter, and stared at me like I'd said my name in a language I didn't speak. "I hate you right now," she said, "and I'm in love with someone else." Every sound in the house went quiet. It was like the dishwasher paused mid-hum to respect the moment. I heard my own heartbeat like a clock in another room. "Who?" I asked, because that's what men ask when we need a place to put our rage. "Ethan," she said, like she was reading it off a sheet at the DMV. I asked how long. She said, "A couple months." I asked what in love meant, because people say that when they mean lots of things. She told me, lunches, sitting in his truck, talking about me like I was a weather pattern, a kiss in the supply hallway, then more. Then that day, in the cab of his truck, hands where they didn't belong, and a promise that the rest would come soon. She said it in a flat voice, as if facts can make honesty noble. Honesty does not sanctify harm. It only lights it better. I didn't throw anything. I didn't shout. I stood up, went to our bedroom, and put clothes into a suitcase the way you pack for a funeral. Slow, careful, aware there's a dress code. She followed, talking in circles. Blame, apology, blame again. As if she could say a version that would land softly. When I walked to the door with my bag, she pivoted to mockery. "Running to your mother's? Real mature, Nolan." I set the suitcase on the porch, turned back, took her purse off the hook by the door, and handed it to her. "You need to go," I said. "I'm not leaving my house," she said, but she stepped backward anyway. I opened the door wider. She stood there like the air hurt. I guided her hands on her upper arms, not rough, not tender either, and set her on the hood of her car. She didn't move right away, shocked into stillness, which gave me enough time to close the door and lock the deadbolt. She hit it with her palm once. The porch light made her face look like a picture of someone I used to know. Then the driveway swallowed her taillights and the house reported back, room by room, that we were alone. I didn't sleep. I made a list. Lists don't care if you've been gutted. Tuesday morning, I called my sister to take Mia after preschool. I called a lawyer by 9. By 11, I was at the bank closing our joint accounts. I withdrew half and left it in a cashier's check with Sophie's sister, Leah, at the boutique where she worked. "This is Soph's half. Tell her to go through you. We won't be speaking directly." I stopped at Buckeye Locksmith and bought 2 deadbolts. I canceled the credit card Sophie liked to use for online shopping. Efficiency is a solve if you prefer pain mapped onto tasks. I learned later that Tuesday was the day Sophie went to see Ethan's place. Not a home. An apartment above a print shop that Ethan and 2 coworkers rented month to month cash. A quiet hideaway where nobody asked questions and you didn't leave anything behind. You'd miss if it burned. She wrote about it later in a composition notebook. She dropped at my door like a stray cat thin towels. A couch that smelled like someone else's life. A lamp that hummed when you turned it on. She and Ethan slept together that afternoon while I stood in a bank signing my name, the way you sign to confirm receipt of a package you didn't order. In her notebook, she called the sex electric in the first paragraph and hollow in the next. She wrote, "I thought something would change after. It didn't. I just felt like I'd stepped outside of myself and forgot how to get back in." She didn't show me that notebook for months. When I did read those lines, they didn't make me feel better. They made me feel like I was watching a house I built without reading the instructions fall down on a family inside. Wednesday, my attorney filed the dissolution petition with misconduct cited. Ohio is no fault for most, but you can still write the truth into the record. I asked a buddy who knew a Franklin County Sheriff's deputy to make sure the papers were served at Riverside Orthopedics. I said the words, "I own them," during work hours. Cruel? You can call it that. I call it refusing to help her hide the size of the thing she'd set loose. Thursday, 12:06 p.m. The deputy pushed through the clinic's glass doors, uniform neat enough to be a sermon. The waiting room was a lull, midday, between morning rush and afternoon overflow. Front desk staff in powder blue scrubs, a TV on mute showing a loop of knee replacement animations, a ficus trying to be a tree. He asked the desk, "I'm looking for Sophie Hale." The front desk manager, Marta, gestured toward the back hallway. "She's on pre-op calls." He waited. Sophie came up the hall with a clipboard, ponytail tight, lips pressed into concentrate. She saw the uniform and tried to look past him, like he must need someone else. He didn't. "Ms. Hale?" he asked. "Yes," she said, voice small but steady. He lifted the manila packet just enough to make it official. "Ma'am, you're being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Nolan Hale, citing marital misconduct." He didn't shout. He didn't whisper. He used a clear classroom voice designed for people who pretend they didn't hear you the first time. The room did that thing where silence is a sound. One of the nurses froze with a stack of charts. A man in a brace blinked and turned toward the desk. Ethan had just rounded the corner from imaging with a coil of cable over his shoulder. He stopped like his shoelaces were tied together. Sophie's face collapsed. She said, "No, no, no," like she was trying to rewind. Her knees gave. The clipboard clattered. She grabbed for the counter and missed, then sat down hard on the wax tile, palms up, as if she'd been placed there. A sound came out of her I had never heard. Part sob, part growl, part animal that knows the trap is already closed. "Get up," Marta said without meanness, reaching down. Sophie swatted her away and turned to Ethan like he was supposed to narrate this into something else. "You said this wouldn't," she started. Ethan said nothing. He looked at the deputy. He looked at the papers. He looked at Marta. He looked at the exit, the way anyone does when the room has too much oxygen and not enough air. "Ms. Hale," the deputy said, setting the packet gently on the counter. "You've been served." Sophie lunged up and grabbed at Ethan's polo, fingers catching skin before cotton, leaving 3 hot red lines under his collarbone. "You told me," was all she got out before Marta snapped, "Security, now!" The 2 guards who usually tell teenagers to put away vape pens in the parking lot appeared like they'd been waiting for a cue. Sophie sagged. She put her face in her hands. Someone handed her a tissue. HR paged her to conference room B. Ethan got paged to C. It took 40 minutes for the rumors to run the building. By the time HR asked Sophie to hand over her badge, 2 nurses from OR were pretending to refill a glove box just to watch. A PA from Sports Med stood in the doorway like theater. HR recited policy about conduct unbecoming, conflict of interest, patient trust, and reputational harm, which is corporate for "you embarrassed us, and we will erase you to keep the furniture arranged." Sophie signed a paper that said separation, and another that said confidentiality, and another that said final paycheck, mailed within 7 business days. She called Ethan from her car. He didn't answer. She texted. He didn't text back. He was in conference room C signing the exact same papers, listening to the exact same speech, wondering who had told whom first, as if order of operations could save him. The sun was still high when the second act started. 4,032 p.m. My doorbell rang. I opened it to a woman who looked like she'd already done 3 brave things that day and had room for 1 more. Melissa Caldwell. 29 weeks pregnant if my eyes measured right. Wedding ring on a swollen finger. Face like a fighter who picks her punches. "Are you Nolan?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Ethan's wife." She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She asked if she could sit, and I said yes, and we sat in my living room while Mia stacked plastic blocks on a rug that needed vacuuming. Melissa watched my daughter a long second and said, "I'm sorry, not because I did any of it, because I'm on your couch saying his name to you and your kid is in the room." She told me Ethan had come home early, high on adrenaline and something smokable, talking fast about HR and witch hunts, and we didn't even do it at work, and then he sat down and told the truth by accident because men like him can't help narrating the version where they're the rogue. He told her about the apartment. He told her about how the guys at Central Hospital used to keep a notepad. Just dumb locker room stuff, he'd said, like bets during March Madness, but for whatever. And how he didn't write anything down because he wasn't that guy. And how Aiden had 3 and Rick had 2. And how it turns out not being that guy on paper is not the same as not being that guy in your life. He told her about Sophie and 2 others, and then the way he said Sophie's name gave Melissa the map she needed. "I'm not here to scream," Melissa told me. "I did that already with the person who earned it. I'm here to tell you this wasn't about you not being enough. It was about them wanting to feel like the main character. They found each other because they were both looking in the same mirror." She handed me a small envelope printed screenshots of texts, a couple of photos I didn't look at long. Not porn. Worse, enthusiasm. "You make me feel seen." Today, 20 minutes. A photo of coffee cups. The phrase, "locked door?" followed by a winking emoji that made my stomach clench like it knew the punchline. "Where is she right now?" Melissa asked. "Her parents' place," I said. 2 miles from here." "I'm going to go tell her what he told me," she said, standing. "Not to hurt her, because the truth is the one thing that sounds the same no matter who says it." She paused. "Do you want me to tell you what she looks like when the truth hits her? I can call you after." "No," I said quietly. "I didn't need a souvenir." She walked to the door, then turned back. "Don't make excuses for her to be noble," Melissa said. "She made choices. So did he. The only noble thing left is to choose your kid and your sanity." She left with her jaw set, a woman who already had a plan for a life that didn't include a man like Ethan. I stood there a moment in the doorway, watching the sky put on its evening color. Mia toddled over and reached up. "Up," she said. I picked her up, and she patted my cheek like she always does when she thinks I look too serious. At Sophie's parents' house, the scene wrote itself the way all bad scenes write themselves, like a play with lines you've heard before. Melissa asked for Sophie on the porch. Patty, Sophie's mother, moved to block the door. Dawn, her father, put a hand on his wife's shoulder and said, "Let the girl speak." Sophie came out in a robe that still smelled like the dryer. Eyes puffy, hair a ghost of how it looked that morning. "I'm Melissa," she said. "Ethan's wife." Sophie swallowed. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Melissa said. Then, calmly, she stacked the facts on the porch rail like books. The apartment, the notepad, the friends, the number of women, the order he'd confessed in, the identical HR speech. She didn't embellish. The truth didn't need a costume. Sophie's face went from shock to shame to anger and back so fast it looked like flicker. She started with blame. He said he was separated, then slid to apology. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt." And Melissa put a hand up. "Stop auditioning," Melissa said. "You hurt people. That's what this is." Sophie made a small, wounded noise. Melissa took a breath that looked like it hurt her ribs and said the sentence that, later, Sophie's father repeated to me like a line from a legend. "You're not trash. Stop acting like you belong with it." And then, because the universe sometimes insists on choreography, Melissa slapped Sophie once across the face. Not wind up, not wild. A clean, open-handed punctuation mark. Patty gasped like a victim in a soap opera. Dawn didn't move. Sophie put her hand to her cheek the way you touch a hot pan you didn't see. "Shame on you," Melissa said, "and shame on him twice." She left. The door shut. Dawn leaned back against it, closed his eyes, and said, "Well, I didn't see that slap. I didn't need to." I could hear it in the way Sophie talked after, the way humiliated people talk when the mirror won't lie. What came next was paperwork and fallout. HR termination letters, bad whispers, a Facebook post from someone's cousin who couldn't believe the trash at Riverside that got deleted after an hour and screenshotted by half the West Side. Patty called me 10 times in a day. I didn't answer until Dawn texted, "Please take my call." Dawn apologized without qualifiers. "I didn't raise her to be like this," he said, "and it broke something in me. I didn't know it was still fragile because I believed him." We set up a temporary parenting plan. Mia with me full-time until court. Sophie permitted supervised visits at the Whetstone Park playground on Sundays for 2 hours. I picked the location because there are benches and a lot of dogs to distract a 3-year-old who thinks running solves everything. In the domestic relations courtroom, Patty wore a suit that looked like a magazine ad for respectability and said words that made me wonder if we were describing the same month. "He has a temper. He assaulted her," meaning the night I guided her to her car. "His job is dangerous. I don't want my granddaughter around that." The magistrate did not change expressions. My attorney asked me questions whose answers were documented: income, hours, child care plan, home, support network. Then Sophie did the one thing I will always remember her. For after the worst day, she told the truth without trying to make it pretty. "I did this," she said, voice rough from lack of sleep. "Nobody made me. My husband didn't neglect me into a stranger's truck. He was gone a lot and I chose the worst way to tell him I was lonely. I'm sorry to my child, to Nolan, to my parents. I don't ask for anything except time to prove I can be trusted with visits." The magistrate nodded like he'd been waiting for someone to talk like a person instead of a press release. He adopted the temporary plan pending review and a guardian ad litem's report. It wasn't a victory dance, it was a baseline, one I intended to guard like a goal line. Sophie tried apologies by proxy. She left a composition notebook on my porch in a brown paper bag, then another the next week. The pages told her timeline in a voice that sounded like a woman strangling her own rationalizations. She wrote "electric" and "hollow" in the same sentence and described the apartment towel smell like an apology in scent form. She wrote about Ethan's hair, how he touched it when he was lying, which I hated to know because now I had to tell for a man I never wanted to think about again. She wrote about me as if she'd just noticed I was made of organs, not furniture. He wears responsibility like armor. He loves being useful. He acts like grace is a bonus you get after the job is done. Some of those observations were true. None of them made her a victim of anything but her own choices. I returned the notebooks without reading them all the way through. I left a note on top: "Don't leave anything else at my door. Communicate through counsel or your father. Boundaries aren't revenge, they're weather stripping." Ethan tried to call me once from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. He said he wanted to man explain. Men who want to talk man to man rarely intend to tell you something you need to hear. I deleted the message and blocked the number. 2 weeks later, I saw him at a Get-Go parking lot, standing in front of Melissa's SUV while she told him something with her hands. He put his palms out like a man negotiating with gravity. She didn't cry. She looked like a person who had already written a grocery list for a life with one less adult in it. At home, I made Mia a new routine: pancakes on Fridays shaped like animals, library on Saturdays, adventure walks where we counted red doors. At night, after she was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and bullet-pointed a life. Therapy, budget, things I could fix and things I could not. I wrote, "I am not a failure" at the top one night and felt like a teenager scrawling lyrics on a binder. I kept it there anyway. Grief is not a straight line. It's a switchback. There were nights I stood in the hallway outside the bedroom and stared at the bed like it owed me an apology. There were mornings I made Mia's lunch and realized my hands were steady and the coffee tasted like coffee again. There was one bad night I drove past the clinic on purpose and then felt disgusted with myself for giving that building even 10 seconds of my attention. I told my therapist, and she said, "So you tested the stove again? You didn't touch it? Good." The guardian ad litem visited both homes. He played pretend with Mia on our living room floor and asked her what she liked best about Mommy's house. Answer, her robe is soft, which almost killed me with sadness, and what she liked at Daddy's answer, pancake ears. He wrote a report that made the magistrate's decision easy. Primary custody to me, supervised visitation to Sophie for 6 months, with potential for expansion contingent on compliance and continued counseling. It wasn't a trophy. It was a plan for a child who deserved one. Sophie's karma did not end with the papers or the HR escort. Consequences kept showing up like bills. One of her neighbors stopped inviting her to the backyard wine nights because it might be awkward. The group chat she was in made a new one without her. A friend from high school left a comment on her Instagram about betraying the sisterhood, which is funny if you like hypocrisy, because that friend had moved in with a married man for 6 weeks back in the day when Facebook wasn't good at hiding pictures yet. Patty cried to anyone who would listen. Dawn went quiet. In quiet, there is room for reflection. I hope they found some. People want a twist. Did Ethan try to win her back? No. He did what men like him do, disappeared into the version of himself where he's misunderstood. Melissa filed. I know because she texted me, filed today. You don't owe me a reply. Just thought you'd prefer real info to rumors. I replied anyway. I'm sorry he did this to you. You didn't deserve it. She sent back, neither did you. I saw Sophie in a grocery store aisle once at Kroger, 3 months after the papers were served, in the produce section by the avocados. She looked smaller inside herself, not skinnier smaller. She saw me and did a half step like someone hearing their name in public and not wanting to turn. I nodded once, a neutral gesture. She gave a tiny wave back. We both kept moving. I will not pretend there wasn't a part of me that wanted to scream, Look what you did! But the part of me that likes my daughter more than I like my anger won. On Mia's 4th birthday, Sophie came to the park with a gift and a balloon that kept getting away from her, smacking the underside of the pavilion roof like it was trying to escape. She hugged Mia like oxygen, then sat on a bench a polite 10 feet from me, and we talked about preschool drop-off protocols like coworkers who used to be friends. When it was time to go, she stood and said, Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for coming on time, I said. That's how low the bar had dropped, and that's how intentionally we were stepping over it. I wish I could give you a redemption arc. I won't. I could tell you about the woman I met later. Jenna, a teacher who smells like dry erase marker and chai and laughs like she doesn't believe in courtesy laughs. I could tell you we took it slow because Mia deserved slow, and how Jenna never made me feel like a bouncer at the door of my own heart. But this isn't a love story, it's a consequence story, and in consequence stories, the hero is the person who looks at reality and refuses to argue with it. Do I hate Sophie? No. Hate is effort. Indifference is a boundary that saved my life. I don't wish her well or ill. I wish her honest. I hope she uses counseling for something besides a prop. I hope she stops telling herself the version where she fell and starts saying the one where she climbed into a truck and closed the door. As for Ethan, I hope he learns to fix something more complicated than a machine. Men like that always have a buddy to drink with who will call them dog and legend and help them not change. That's none of my business anymore. The day the decree came in the mail, I held the paper and felt exactly nothing. Relief is quiet. I made Mia grilled cheese. We watched a cartoon where a little fox learns to share. I folded the decree and put it in a file with a neutral label because it doesn't deserve a fancy name. Then I went out back and raked the maple leaves into a pile big enough for a child to jump into and disappear for a second. She did, popped up with a leaf on her head, triumphant. Again, she said, we did it again. That's the whole point, really, to make a life where, again, means something safe. People told me I was lucky, that karma arrived early and loud. Luck had nothing to do with it. I asked the deputy to serve at work because secrecy had already done enough favors. HR did their job because policy is easier than morality. Melissa showed up because she is a person with spine. The universe didn't decide to punish Sophie. Sophie built a machine and turned it on, and then acted surprised when it ran exactly the way machines do: unthinking, unforgiving, loud. If you're in the middle of the slow motion version of this, here's the only part where I get prescriptive. Choose the boring work. Make the list. Call the lawyer. Feed the kid. Don't post on Facebook. Don't check the phone bill like it can tell you something your heart hasn't already. Don't argue with someone's shame. It will beat you in the short term and cost you in the long term. Do not set yourself on fire to make a house warm for someone who keeps opening windows. Karma isn't cosmic. It's practical. She was served at noon on a Thursday because she had set the table for that exact meal. She collapsed because first lies are always told to ourselves, and the moment you can't hold yours up anymore, your body knows it before your mouth does. She was fired because companies don't love you, they love quiet. She was slapped because someone else's dignity refused to let your choices stand unchallenged in her presence. None of that brought me joy. It brought me clarity. I don't need a 50th anniversary bonfire to close this loop. There are no composition notebooks in my closet waiting for a ceremony. There is a child who thinks pancake ears are hilarious and that dad's pockets contain infinite snacks. There is a maple that will keep making leaves. There is a life where Thursdays are for groceries and not for serving papers. And there is this story for anyone who needs to hear the sound of a door closing and know that sometimes it's the safest sound there is. What do you think? Was this justice served? Or would you have done something different? Tell me in the comments. If this story hit you, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Your support really helps keep these long-form stories coming.